As promised, Michael Blevins, director of Memphis Made, the Marc Gasol documentary, joins us in studio. Blevins, before we get into the documentary, I do have a trivia question for you and Bennett that Raghav in the chat brought up. Can you tell me who was picked directly after Malachi Flynn of 50-point fame last night from the Pistons? Who was picked right after Malachi Flynn in the draft? And I'm not telling you the year.
You're not telling me the year?
No.
Oh, Malachi Flynn. I'm going to say he's been in the league for a minute, right?
A minute.
Yeah, he's been in the league
for a cup of coffee, if you will.
Is it a superstar? It's a superstar, isn't it?
I think so.
It's a superstar.
I think so.
Shea?
No.
You got nothing?
I got
nothing.
Think closer to home.
Closer to home.
Mm-hmm.
Was he a lottery pick? Was Flynn?
No. 29th pick.
X or BC?
29th. Des Bane.
There you go.
There you go. Okay.
29 teams passed on Desmond Bane, only for the Memphis Grizzlies. Yes, 2020 draft. Malachi Flynn went 29th. He went ahead of Jaden McDaniels, Udoka Azubuike, Peyton Pritchard, Emmanuel Quickley, R.J. Hampton. Who's Leonardo Balmaro? Anything? All right. That's your 2020 end of the first round draft coverage of the morning. Anyway, Blevins, it has been such a fun week seeing all of the response to the Marc Gasol documentary, something that you worked extensively on. How many hours total do you think went into the creation of this documentary?
I think post-production wise, I mean, we're talking maybe 1,000, something like that. We waited for a lot of the interviews to get done because it's kind of hard with something like this because it wasn't the goal kind of with Mark's was different from Zebo's.
Okay.
Where Zebo's, when I was putting together, I was like, this is a story of revenge and redemption, right? Revenge against the Clippers for discarding him, redemption with everything he had gone through. And with Mark, I wanted to get more like a nuance, like you're watching it and you're going to understand everything about him and you're going to understand why he got that in his ring and why people in Memphis care that he got that in his ring at the end, right? So with that, as we were getting interviews, like they were going everywhere in the project. So it was a little tougher. I think I started editing probably into January, lightly, and then heavy duty into the first week of February.
What was the first interview you did? Do you start with Mark or was it someone else?
No. Well, it started, me and him were talking, and I was like, because I joked with him last time when Zebo got his jersey retired, and I was escorting him around and everything, because it was only like me and a couple other people he told he was going to come to the game for that, right? And I was joking like, hey, you might be next, and he's like, I'm still playing, and I joked, what are you going to play till like you're Kareem, like 45, just so you don't have to get your jersey retired?
Just so he doesn't have to do a long interview.
Yeah, he doesn't have to do anything with it. Or see anything about him. And I think, and then we talked a little bit in the summer because I was like, I just want to warn you, we're going to start getting interviews for this. Because we've gotten interviews for Tony, we've gotten interviews that, eventually that we'll use in mics. Just when you get somebody, like we got Hubie Brown, we asked him a bunch of questions. We can use a bunch of different things. So I was like, hey, just so you know, I'm going to ask, I think Nick Nurse was the first interview. I'm going to ask Nick Nurse for an interview in Utah. And then we're going to get some people in Vegas. Is there anybody in particular? And he didn't say anybody different than we were planning. And then we got him. He was probably like the 6th interview because Vegas was Mike, Zebo, Danny Green, Chris Wallace. I think that's it in Vegas. And obviously Nick Nurse in Utah, the summer league before that. And then we got Mark in Springfield when we went to cover Powell's jersey retirement. We rented out a suite at the casino that's up there and interviewed him. It was originally supposed to be only like 45 minutes, ended up being 2 hours. And every person we've told that knows Mark is like, I can't believe he did an interview for 2 hours.
The second you start the interview, did you get a feeling that he was in a place where like he was ready to open up, or do you feel like you had to Like, were you hoping, like, oh, how are we going to get 45 minutes out of this? Or were you immediately like, oh, this is going to go 2 hours?
I think so. I was putting together. Typically, when I put together the questions, and it helps because I'm editing it too. I'm answering the questions. I'm editing. Mm-hmm. I want it in sort of an order for everybody, right? Mm-hmm. But I knew there were some questions, like Mark back in the day probably wouldn't have loved talking about, right?
Right.
So I placed them in certain spots in there. But I think probably like 10 minutes into it, because he started from, when they moved over, blah, blah, blah. And he was all about it. And sometimes I'll catch myself because they don't hear me asking the questions typically, right?
Yeah.
So yours is a little bit different world where I'm just like, bam, bam, bam.
Right.
And I'll do it with our players where it's like, I don't want to waste your time, so I ask them questions. And then I realize, like, God, they're having to do like a sprint, like a medley relay between each question. But yeah, I mean, he was, I think from the get-go, it was like, oh, we got something special here. And it was, I think he was really, when you're doing an interview, when you're doing a documentary about somebody like that, their interview is the driving force. Mm-hmm. You know what they want to talk about, what they want to focus on and everything. His was the backbone of everything.
And then you fill out everything else around it. One of the players you didn't say you got at Summer League, but who was in it, Kevin Durant. Where did you interview KD?
We interviewed him downstairs. We had put we had gotten Chris Paul for Zebo's, and Chris Paul had a great interview. This is when he was on Phoenix. A great interview with us for Tony. Mm-hmm. And we requested Kevin Durant for Tony's. And then, as we're going through it, it's going great. He is like the nicest guy, and he just loves basketball. And he was so like, we told him Tony's, and then I gave him the box score from the Grit Grind game, right? Because the original Grit Grind game was against them.
Right.
And he had a laugh about that, and then asked a few questions, and I'm like, we'll return Mark's too. And he goes, oh, that's awesome. Those guys, like, the four of them, I've said it before, like, there's just a respect, especially with the superstars, because it feels like those four guys earned everything, right?
Yeah.
And they were never disrespectful. There was never issues, except for Zebo with that one player, famously. But there was just respect with those guys. So when I told him about Mark, like, he was like, oh, yeah, I'll do a question.
Right.
And this was like, you'll understand this as a media member. He didn't play in the game, but still he had to do stuff before the game. It was like 45 minutes before tip.
Wow.
Which, like, players don't do stuff.
It's a rarity, for sure. And I loved, when he starts talking about it. And I hear this about Kevin Durant all the time.
Yeah.
He's just the nicest guy who just wants to talk about basketball all the time. And there's this, like, deep respect for great basketball and successful basketball and how that can be even without a ring. And to hear Kevin Durant float around the word dynasty, and we get so territorial about our usage of the word dynasty, and it is always attached to teams that have won at least a championship, usually multiple championships. But the fact that he's even willing to enter that territory, I thought was so indicative of the imprint that these four had.
And I think, not to get into too much Durant stuff because I'm not the person to speak about him, but I think he brought up the idea that they were dynasty because they were together for that long, right?
Yeah.
And this happened, I think a lot of his stuff is overblown with the media and stuff because he's such a high-profile player. I worked for 4 different organizations and a college one. It's hard to keep a team together. And it's not just like playing well and doing all that stuff. It's hard to keep a band together. How many bands do we know break up and stuff like that? So I think he looks at it with that prism where he's been on different teams, and it's hard to keep it together and everybody pulling the rope the same way. And from the outside and on the inside, those 4 of those dudes never let go of that rope.
Was there a part of the documentary as you are either conducting the interview or starting the editing process where you get that, like, director buzz where you just know, oh, people are going to react so positively, or just have a reaction period to this?
The first thing was an idea. So a lot of times it's just a matter of me doing the keyboard and mouse where I have it already in my head. The hardest thing is like the stuff that doesn't go in order. So like the Mark competitor stuff, I knew I wanted to do a segment. It's like, where do I put that? Open Arms to St. Jude, where do I put that? But there's certain things where like, oh, here's a little magic trick I could do. The one I really liked, and no one's really talked about, is like the first thing in the film is you hear my voice asking him what a Memphian is. And then I'm like, I need to find a clip. So the last one is him saying, I'm a Memphian, right? So you go an hour and 43 minutes, and it's like, well, this is what a Memphian is. And then I think just finding the song that's used 3 different times in there, like the beginning, the 2013 one, and then at the very end was a big one. But I thought, yeah, when Jeff Calkins has that line about what they meant to the city, and I was like, oh, that's going to stitch perfectly with the Durant one. I thought, oh, yeah, that's going to be cool.
For you, like as a director of a documentary, did you always was the goal eventually to make documentaries?
Yeah, so it's funny you asked that. I was a terrible student at LSU. All I wanted to do was work. Terrible student. Most people are terrible at LSU for different reasons, which I was more so my freshman year.
Okay.
Like there's fun things to do
The
at
party
night.
side of it.
Yeah. But I just wanted to work. And I switched majors like 3 times, and then I switched to general studies, right? So all those anybody watching right now, you got general studies degree, or you want to get a general studies degree, you can do whatever you want, right?
Yeah.
You can work in sports. I'm sure there's plenty. Yeah, it's general.
General is very wide.
But I had to petition because it was like a bunch of things I didn't want to do. I just want to work and then do classes that are easy for me. So then I had to petition 3 minors for it, right? And it was kinesiology, sociology, film studies. And I had to write a paper to the dean. I was like, I want to make like sports documentaries, and kinesiology, you're learning about sports studies, blah, blah, blah. Film, you're learning about film. And sociology, you're learning about the people, right? And you're learning about what makes people tick, what makes societies tick, different stuff like that. And I was like, that's very important, because you're going to be doing stories about people that you would have never encountered when you're younger. You've never gone through the stuff they've gone through. So, yeah, I don't remember that professor's name, but I appreciate him approving that.
What was your favorite sports documentary of all time? Like, what were your inspos?
It's tough. Honestly, my favorite thing we were talking about before we got on air, what I like to do, like before I do an intro video, I like to like watch something like really high end. So like I was working on the intro video and then Beyond Grits before the season and the Tony Allen hype video we did, and I'm like, I'm going to see the Scorsese film, Flower Moon.
Yeah, Killers of the Flower Moon.
I was like, I need to go watch that. That'll give me
great opening scene.
That'll give me ticket. Yes, and then like I'll do that with. I really like Tarantino, so I'll watch Tarantino. And then for this one, I watched. My favorite documentary ever is the Kurt Cobain montage of Heck One. That's my favorite.
Good choice.
And he's my favorite documentary maker because, again, I did the opposite in this. He doesn't use a bunch of sound bites. He doesn't use a bunch of interviews. He uses a bunch of footage. They use some animation, which we did too. And then for the other inspiration, as it was going on, I was rewatching The Sopranos. And because I like The Sopranos, it's high end. And it's also I knew in this documentary, I wanted every detail to be there for a reason. And you're like learning this thing about Mark, or you're learning. A little one is like the pyramid was empty when he was going to games, and it kind of made him sad, right? So then when he comes here and it's full with towels and everything, you understand why he gets emotional when he talks about that. And in Sopranos, it's like, oh, Carmelo did this, so that means once they have that fight, you're past that point.
Well,
right?
yes. So I just watched. I'm halfway through the last season of The Sopranos. I'm half of an episode away from being halfway through with it. But Carmela and Ro just went to Paris together. Ro seems like a
Carmela, why are you talking about all that stuff? We're here in Paris.
Why do we want to talk about my dead son? I want to go out with a hot young Parisian man. But you think about it but that's how The Sopranos works. I think that's such a good point, because immediately my brain is like, okay, what is this impact in Carmela's journey and her relationship with Tony? And Tony's not there, and you never see them. Suddenly I'm thinking, you've never seen this family take vacations. How difficult it must be as mafia members to just get a vacation every now and then.
You know why it's difficult to go on vacation?
Because you might not come back.
Well, also because Carmela's just going to be a downer the entire time.
That too.
I rewatched. Sorry, I want to promote the movie and everything,
Yes, of course.
but I rewatched the podcast. Michael Imperioli and I think Steve Stripper, whoever has
Talking Sopranos. So good.
It's so good.
And David Chase. Usually when I watch a thing, like Aaron Sorkin, I could tell has a complicated relationship with women in his life based on his characters.
Yes.
Chase was tough to tell because nobody looks good in that series, but he is not a fan of Carmela. When he talks about the interviews, he's like, she's the only mob wife like this where it's like, you're going to hell, Tony, and then why are we doing this? And where's my diamond ring at the same time?
No, all of a sudden there's like a shift of the morality of it where she's like, but I really want my Porsche.
He has no respect for her.
I really want this Louis Vuitton purse you just gave me with $15K in it to take
Where's
on
the
my
bird
vacation.
feeder with the money in it?
I'd say he has a complicated relationship with women because of all of the Freudiism with Tony's mom and with his sister and obviously through therapy.
We can do a
Anyway,
whole thing on that.
We can have a whole off-season conversation about The Sopranos. Grind City Media presents Sopranos rewatch. I would do it all over again. But when it comes to like your inspiration, I think that's so interesting. The sociology class in college is perfect. I think more journalism majors should take sociology classes because you're right. You end up talking to so many different people. Is there anyone who you really wanted to talk to for this documentary who it just didn't work out for whatever reason?
We tried to get some of the Spanish national team. I mean, it's a dilemma when you're doing this because we didn't want, during Zebo's, it was like COVID, so we were just kind of limited. Like Doris Burke's interview, ESPN had to shoot in, they had to shoot on ESPN cameras. And again, for people that are not in the weeds, like those cameras look very different. So the only ones we wanted were willing to do Zoom were the open arms. Those everybody associated with that. We didn't want to do a bunch of overseas like that. I think Ricky Rubio would have been really good. He's back overseas. A couple of those. I mean, the dilemma with the Spanish national team is like it's not easy to get photos and footage from it.
Yeah.
Because you cover the Olympics. Yeah, they guard that pretty strict.
It's like under lock and key.
But there's not a lot. I mean, there's a lot with Tony. I'm already thinking in my head about Tony's. I want to get. But again, like those four guys, Tony's story be a little bigger and have a little more depth and about his journey and who he is. But with those four guys, honestly, it's not important to get like Joel Embiid for Mark. Like, do we really like? Is that going to add to the story? I don't think
Not
so.
necessarily. Someone in the chat said they wanted to hear from Project Pat.
Project Pat would have been interesting because we got Yo Gotti and Moneybag for Zebo's. But I think we tried and it wasn't going to work out. But yeah.
It doesn't surprise you at all. We were talking about this off air, but Mark hasn't watched the documentary. Do you think he will ever watch the documentary?
I think he told me he was very excited and eager to see it, but it was going to be very difficult. I forget what the exact phrasing was. I'll see him today. We were joking about it. I'm sure we'll see him today, and people are going to talk to him about it. And eventually, he's just going to know that everything's in the documentary. Because eventually, like, he was on Vernon and stuff, and it's like, hey, that story you're telling right now is in the documentary. Like, we already know it, right? He did the Frasier thing up here.
That was so funny.
It made it even more funny because everybody on Twitter is like, oh, we know. We heard the stories. We heard the Escalade going through Frasier.
Are you doing this like Beyonce Renaissance? Are you going to tell us at the end that all these documentaries fit perfectly together, like one segs into the next, and you can just tee them up 1, 2, 3, 4?
I've thought about that, honestly. I think, knock on wood, we win a championship and we do something like that.
Stop it.
I think the Mark one and the championship one should link really well just because where one stops and where one goes. I think that would. Because, I mean, like people are saying this is a documentary about grit and grind. People can, it's done. They can, it's not up to me how it's interpreted, but I think it's more about who Mark is, and he was all about that. It's so funny. I don't know if I told this. I may have told this on the panel. There's just a few interview bites we can't use, and I think maybe I posted this one on Twitter. He was just very, like, sharing with the ball, right? Mm-hmm. Like, he didn't want to be the guy. But he said in the interview, and I had told some of his former teammates, they laughed really hard at it, he was like, I wish we would have shot more. When I needed to, I wish we would have shot more. And especially those last couple of years, he was just trying to get everybody else going. But yeah, hopefully it fit his personality, and knock on wood, those two could be stitched together.
Yeah, and within his personality too, even when you hear him reflecting on winning Defensive Player of the Year, he's like, I don't understand individual awards. This is a team thing. And that kind of goes for the documentary side of it and the core four and the singular jersey retirement at a time. Like, this is a collective. One does not have the same impact without the other three. And I think that's a very special place to come from. I can't wait. I love the championship parade. If you can get it to exist outside of the cartoon. Who did the animation for that?
Ben. I'm going to mispronounce his name, so I'm not even going to try it. I think I tweeted it out. artist. I think he's in New York. And we had Courtney from my crew had shot with the drone out there. And he was like, oh, I could just stitch right in there.
Oh,
and then
cool.
we're like, let's widen Beale Street a little bit just so all the buses, because I don't know if that theoretically would happen. That question came about because I was like, I wanted Mark to emotionally speak about why he wanted to win a championship. And I was just kind of rambling, and hopefully he could take one of the questions. I was like, when I think about it, I think about how we would film it.
Right.
And I've thought about that, especially the one you were in the second round, like where we put cameras there. Where are they going to decide the parade goes? Does it go near the Civil Rights Museum? Does it go down by the river? All that stuff. And then he's like, oh, this is how I would do it. And then just like that. And
he so clearly has
it would be special
if
whenever that day happens that those 4 guys are involved somehow.
I think it would almost be a must.
Yes. I think let's put him at the back because of what Zebo said he would be like in the parade and what the video evidence shows Mark would be in the parade. Like the far back. That was it. That was Mark's issue. He said, he's like, I was the last bus. So like all the people were behind me. Like I was stuck having to catch all the beers.
Beers, you're not going to waste them.
No.
It's a victory parade beer. Well, anyway, Blevins, congratulations. Truly, you and your team did a phenomenal job. Every time I get on X, there's a new tweet of somebody who just watched the documentary. It's like, oh my God, this took me back. This had the best memories of Memphis. This reminded me of a story that I forgot from long ago. This gave such a complete picture of who Marc Gasol is as a person and as a Memphian. So mission accomplished.
The hope is everybody's excited. I mean, they didn't need the documentary to get excited for Saturday, but hopefully that reminds everybody of the importance. I think it'll be a special night. Powell will be there, Zebo, Tony. Mike's not going to be able to because of logistics stuff, but we'll have a cool video with him. There'll be more cool videos in it. We got tickets, I believe, still available. So everybody get your tickets, show up. I think it's going to be one of those nights. You were there for Zebo's, right?
Yeah.
It's going to be one of those nights where it's in the Mount Rushmore of nights at the FedEx Forum, I think.
There's so much, you just feel it radiating within. They mean so much, understandably, to the city. And that's where I will push back. Do you have to have a documentary? No. But does it do a wonderful job of creating context for either people who were too young or who weren't here? I mean, we talked, I got here in 2016, and so I know, and I had a general sense of basketball and the Grizzlies' position within the NBA and the core 4, but you don't know, much like the city of Memphis as a whole, you don't understand this city until you live here yourself, until you experience it yourself. But a documentary does a really good job of guiding you along the way.
And we do such a good job. Again, we work here, so
we can say
I would like to think I'm not blowing smoke about us.
Sure.
But it's like I'm on the road with the team, and I'm there for some of these jersey retirements. And this is no offense to the players or their jersey retirements. I'm sure they have reasons for this. A lot of them are just like halftime, and it's like bam, 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 it's done. So this could be post game. I was there at the rehearsal last night. This thing's gonna be special, and I think as a for documentary, for my sake, if the person's good enough to get their jersey retired, they're good enough for a documentary.
Blevins, we will see you next time. If you have not watched Memphis Made, the Marc Gasol documentary, highly, highly suggest you do so. It's up on the Memphis Grizzlies YouTube page, and you can find it all over social media.
The Jessica Benson Show with CJ Hart, live every weekday at 8 a.m.